The observers doubt. The conference chamber aboard the Alliance flagship Eternal Vigil hummed with the nervous energy of a dozen different species. Ambassador Kelrith of the Syntherian Collective stood near the observation window, their translucent form shifting between shades of deep blue and anxious violet. In 300 cycles of diplomatic service, they had never witnessed such chaos in a military briefing. The gathering storm. The Void Reapers were coming. Every sensor array across 4 star systems screamed the same warning. The enemy had consumed 17 colonies in the past solar rotation, leaving nothing but silent, lifeless rocks where thriving civilizations once stood. They were methodical, ruthless, and seemingly unstoppable. The Grand Alliance had assembled their most powerful fleet in response, pulling vessels from every member species. Kelrith counted warships from the Turellian Empire, cruisers from the Vexian Harmony, and defensive platforms from the peaceful Mindari Coalition. It was the largest military gathering in recorded galactic history. And yet, everyone in the chamber was staring at the humans. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the central holographic display, her dark hair pulled back in what humans called a ponytail. She wore a simple gray uniform with minimal decorations, nothing like the elaborate military regalia of the other commanders. Her face showed no fear, no anxiety, just a calm determination that Kelrith found deeply unsettling. Beside her stood 3 other humans, each representing different aspects of their military structure. There was Tactical Officer Marcus Rivera, Engineering Specialist Dr. Yuki Tanaka, and someone they simply called Chief, a grizzled human whose role Kelrith could not quite determine. The unconventional arrival. The humans had arrived 6 hours earlier in vessels that looked barely functional. Their ships bore scorch marks, hull breaches hastily patched with what appeared to be improvised materials, and energy signatures that fluctuated wildly. When Admiral Vorith of the Turellian Empire questioned their combat readiness, Commander Chen had smiled. That expression, Kelrith noted, seemed to make the other military leaders uncomfortable. "Our ships are exactly where we need them to be," Chen had replied. Her translator device rendered her words in perfect galactic standard, but something in her tone suggested deeper meanings. "We've been fighting the Reapers for 3 months before we received your distress call. We know their patterns." 3 months. Kelrith felt their form shimmer with surprise. No species had survived 3 months of continuous engagement with the Void Reapers. Most civilizations fell within days. The longest recorded resistance was the Kelmorian defense, which had lasted 18 days before their homeworld went silent. Yet here stood these humans, claiming sustained combat operations across an entire stellar season. The confusing strategy. "This is madness," High Commander Zaraxis of the Vexian Harmony announced, their 4 arms gesturing emphatically at the tactical display. The hologram showed the proposed battle formations, with Alliance forces arranged in a defensive sphere around the contested system's primary inhabited planet. Standard doctrine proven across centuries of warfare. Except for one glaring problem. The humans wanted to position themselves at the very front. Not just at the front, but beyond the defensive perimeter entirely. Chen's proposed formation placed human vessels in a scattered line between the Alliance fleet and the approaching enemy. They would be the first to make contact, the first to take fire, the first to die. Every military algorithm predicted their complete annihilation within the first 5 minutes of combat. "You are asking us to use your forces as expendable shields," Zaraxis continued, their voice harmonizing with moral outrage. "The Vexian Harmony cannot condone such wasteful tactics. Every life is precious, every vessel represents years of construction and training." Chen nodded slowly. "You're right. Every life is precious. That's exactly why we're taking this position." She manipulated the holographic controls, zooming in on the projected enemy approach vector. The Reapers use psychological warfare as their primary weapon. They broadcast fear, they project overwhelming force, they make you believe resistance is futile before they even fire a shot. Every species they've faced so far has fought them the same way. Maximum defensive preparations, calculated retreat protocols, preservation of forces. "Because those are sound tactical principles," Admiral Vorith interjected. His reptilian features showed clear frustration. "Principles developed over millennia of warfare. The human difference." "Sure," Chen agreed. "Sound tactics for fighting other civilized species who follow rules and respect certain boundaries. But the Reapers aren't civilized. They're not even alive in the way we understand life. There's something else, something that feeds on fear and despair." She paused, and Kelrith noticed her hands had formed into fists. "We've fought them. We've seen what they do. And we've learned something important. They've never faced an enemy that charges directly at them. The chamber fell silent. Calrith processed this statement, running it through multiple cognitive frameworks. Charging at the enemy. Direct assault. Aggressive forward action in the face of overwhelming odds. It violated every principle of survival warfare. Species survived by being cautious, by calculating risks, by preserving their numbers against extinction. Charging toward certain death was not strategy, it was suicide. Dr. Tanaka stepped forward, her voice softer than Chen's but no less intense. We've analyzed 17 battle sites where the Reapers destroyed other civilizations. Every single engagement followed the same pattern. The defenders established strong positions, the Reapers overwhelmed them with numbers and psychological attacks. The defenders broke and retreated, and the Reapers hunted down the survivors. It's a formula that's worked perfectly for them. So we're going to break the formula, Marcus Rivera added. The tactical officer brought up combat recordings, grainy footage of human vessels engaged with Reaper forces. Calrith watched in horror as human ships dove directly into enemy formations, taking devastating hits but never retreating. We learned something fighting on Earth in our own history. Sometimes the best defense is a really, really aggressive offense. Ancient human wisdom. Chief spoke for the first time, his voice gravelly and aged. My grandfather fought in the last great war on Earth before we achieved world peace. He told me something I never forgot. Fear is contagious, but so is courage. When one soldier charges forward, others follow. When one ship refuses to break, the formation holds. The Reapers are counting on us being afraid. We're going to show them what humans do with fear. Calrith moved closer to the display, studying the human faces. There was something in their expressions, something that didn't translate well through their cultural database. These beings had come from a planet where survival meant constant struggle, where their own world had tried to kill them with weather, predators, and diseases for millions of years. They had evolved not to avoid danger but to face it directly. You are proposing to sacrifice your entire fleet, Calrith finally spoke, their voice resonating through the chamber. Your species will be extinct by the end of this battle. Chen turned to face Calrith directly. Her eyes, Calrith noted, were an unusual shade of brown, warm and alive in a way that synthetic beings could never fully replicate. Ambassador, my species has been dying since the moment we were born. Every human who's ever lived has known they were mortal, that their time was limited. But we learned something important along the way. It's not about how long you live, it's about what you do with the time you have. The preparation rituals. The briefing ended without consensus. Alliance commanders agreed to the defensive formation but insisted the humans maintain standard retreat protocols. Chen accepted their terms with another one of those unsettling smiles, and the various species returned to their vessels to prepare for the coming battle. Calrith followed the human delegation back to their section of the fleet, curiosity overwhelming diplomatic protocol. What they witnessed in the following hours would haunt them for the rest of their long existence. The human ships were not conducting standard pre-battle procedures. Instead of running system diagnostics and weapon calibrations, the crews were gathering in common areas. They were eating together, sharing what they called meals in a communal fashion. They were playing music, loud and rhythmic sounds that seemed to pulse with energy. Some were exercising, pushing their bodies to physical limits that seemed counterproductive before combat. Others were writing, recording messages to loved ones they might never see again. Calrith observed one young human pilot, barely into adulthood by their species standards, carefully folding a piece of cloth into a small square. When asked, the pilot explained it was a photograph of his family. He tucked it into his flight suit over his heart. So they'll be with me, he said simply. This was not the behavior of beings preparing for calculated military action. This was the behavior of beings preparing to die, and somehow finding peace with that reality. The enemy arrives. The Void Reapers emerged from dark space exactly when predicted. Calrith watched from the observation deck as reality itself seemed to tear open, spilling forth vessels that defied natural law. They were massive, angular constructs of dark matter and corrupted energy. They moved through space like predators, radiating wrongness that made every living being's instincts scream for immediate flight. Alliance ships immediately shifted into defensive formation, shields powering up, weapon systems coming online. The defensive sphere was textbook perfect, each vessel positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire while maintaining retreat vectors. The human ships moved forward. Chen's voice came through the general communication channel, calm and steady. All human vessels, this is Commander Chen. You know the mission. You know what's at stake. Today we show the galaxy what humans are made of. Today we charge into the dark and we bring the light with us. Calrith felt their form shift to a color they had never experienced before, a mixture of awe, terror, and something they couldn't quite name. The human fleet was accelerating directly toward the Void Reapers, their damaged ships pushing engines beyond safe limits, their weapons already firing even though they were barely in range. And then Calrith heard it. Coming from every human vessel, broadcast on open channels for everyone to hear. Music. Not the calming meditation sounds that most species used to steady nerves before battle. This was something primal, something fierce. Human voices singing together, drums pounding like war drums from ancient times, instruments creating sounds that seemed designed to stir the blood and steel the heart. The Void Reapers hesitated. For the first time in recorded history, the unstoppable enemy paused. Their perfect formation wavered as they processed something they had never encountered before, prey that refused to act like prey. And the humans charged faster, their battle cry echoing across the void. For Earth. For humanity. For everyone who can't fight back. Calrith understood then, in that terrible and beautiful moment, why the stars themselves seemed to tremble when humans went to war. It wasn't because of their weapons or their ships or their tactics. It was because they carried with them something far more dangerous than any technology. They carried the absolute refusal to surrender, the unshakable belief that some things were worth dying for, and the terrifying courage to charge into darkness with nothing but their determination to light the way. The battle was about to begin, and Calrith knew nothing would ever be the same. BS. The charge that changed everything. The first volleys of Reaper fire tore through space like claws ripping through fabric. Calrith watched from the observation deck as dark energy beams, weapons that operated on principles no living species understood, lanced toward the human formation. Every instinct screamed that the humans would be vaporized instantly. Every calculation predicted total annihilation within seconds. The humans scattered like leaves in a storm, but it was not panic. It was precision. The dance of death. Each human vessel moved with purpose, breaking formation in what appeared to be random directions but maintaining exact spacing between ships. Calrith's sensors showed something impossible. The humans were dodging. Not with predictive algorithms or advanced shielding, but with raw piloting skill, throwing their ships into maneuvers that should have torn the vessels apart from structural stress alone. Impossible, Admiral Vorith breathed through the command channel. Their ships cannot handle those G-forces. Their crews should be unconscious or dead. Dr. Tanaka's voice came through, strained but steady. Human bodies can withstand up to 9 GS with proper training and equipment. We've been pulling 7.5 for the last 30 seconds. It hurts like hell, but we're still flying. One human destroyer, the Defiant Spirit, took a direct hit. Its shields flared and died, and a massive section of the hull simply ceased to exist, consumed by dark energy. Calrith expected the vessel to explode or retreat. Instead, the destroyer accelerated harder, diving directly toward the Reaper that had wounded it. The ship was venting atmosphere, trailing debris, and somehow still firing every weapon it had. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the Defiant Spirit," a strained voice announced. "Engineering is gone, life support is failing, but weapons are still hot. If we're going down, we're taking one of these bastards with us." The destroyer slammed into the Reaper vessel at full velocity. The explosion lit up the void like a newborn star. When the glare faded, both ships were gone, but the Reaper formation had a gap in it. A gap that 3 other human vessels immediately exploited, pouring fire through the opening. The psychological warfare reversed. Calrith noticed something extraordinary happening. The Void Reapers, creatures that had never shown anything resembling emotion or hesitation, were changing their tactics. They had stopped broadcasting their fear-inducing frequencies. They had stopped their methodical, patient approach. Instead, they were reacting, responding to human aggression with something that almost looked like urgency. "They're afraid," Chief's voice came through the command channel, rough with exertion. "The bastards are actually afraid. They've never fought anyone who hit back harder than they hit first." Commander Chen's flagship, the Indomitable, led a wedge of 5 cruisers directly into the center of the Reaper formation. It was tactical suicide by every standard military doctrine. The Reapers converged on the human ships from all sides, dark energy weapons firing in a concentrated barrage that should have erased the humans from existence. But the human ships were not where the Reapers expected them to be. Chen had timed the charge perfectly, accelerating just as the Reapers fired, so the enemy's own crossfire pattern caught their own vessels. Dark energy beams tore through Reaper ships as the humans slipped through gaps that existed for fractions of a second. "All Alliance vessels, this is Chen," the commander's voice rang out. "We've broken their formation. The center is exposed. If you want to end this, now is the time to fight, not hide behind your shields." Kelrith watched as the Alliance commanders struggled with the decision. Centuries of doctrine demanded they maintain defensive positions, wait for optimal firing solutions, minimize casualties through careful engagement. But the humans had created an opportunity that would not last. The Reapers were confused, disorganized, vulnerable for perhaps the only moment this battle would offer. When others found courage, Admiral Vorith made the decision first. Tyrellian fleet, advance formation. All weapons, maximum power. We will not let the humans die alone. His reptilian features set in grim determination, he maneuvered his massive dreadnought forward, followed by 30 Tyrellian cruisers. High Commander Zaraxis of the Vexian Harmony hesitated only a moment longer. The humans charge into death with songs on their lips, they said, their four arms moving in what Kelrith recognized as a gesture of respect. The Vexian Harmony has forgotten how to be brave. Today we remember. All ships forward. One by one the Alliance species committed their forces. The Mindari, who had never fired a weapon in anger in their entire history, moved their defensive platforms into offensive positions. The Krellian swarm ships, tiny individual fighters that preferred hit-and-run tactics, formed into massive assault waves. Even the cautious Syntharians, Kelrith's own people, began moving forward, their energy-based vessels pulsing with light as they charged weapons that had been designed for defense, not assault. The human charge had become a galactic charge. Fear was indeed contagious, but so was courage. The cost of bravery. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. The Void Reapers, faced with an enemy that refused to break, began to falter. Their perfect coordination, based on predictable prey behavior, collapsed when confronted with unpredictable aggression. Human vessels continued to take devastating losses, 15 destroyers gone, 7 cruisers crippled, and thousands of human lives extinguished in flashes of fire and void. But they never stopped fighting. Kelrith witnessed a human medical frigate, unarmed and damaged, deliberately ram a Reaper vessel that was targeting a Mindari colony ship. The frigate's doctor, a woman named Sarah Okonkwo, broadcast a message as she made her final run. The Mindari saved my daughter from a disease we couldn't cure. I pay my debts. Kelrith watched a single human fighter pilot, his ship's weapons depleted and systems failing, use his vessel as a shield to protect a formation of young Vexian pilots who had become separated from their fleet. The pilot's name was James Chin, and Kelrith later learned he was Commander Chen's younger brother. He did not survive, but all 15 Vexian pilots made it back to their carrier. Marcus Rivera's tactical brilliance became apparent as the battle progressed. He had been feeding the human vessel's combat data to all Alliance ships in real time, teaching them through example how to fight the Reapers. The aliens began to understand that these dark creatures could be hurt, could be confused, could be beaten if you were willing to accept that victory might cost everything. The turning point. The climax came when the Reaper mothership, a massive construct 10 times larger than any Alliance vessel, emerged from the rear of their formation. It was a thing of pure nightmare, radiating wrongness that made reality itself seem to bend around it. This was the source, the intelligence that coordinated all Reaper forces. Destroy it and the entire Reaper fleet would lose cohesion. Every Alliance commander understood this, but approaching the mothership meant passing through a wall of Reaper defenders and entering range of weapons that could erase capital ships with single shots. It was not survivable. Even in their newfound courage, the Alliance forces hesitated. Commander Chin did not. All remaining human vessels, this is your commander. That thing in the center, that's our target. I know we're down to half strength. I know most of our ships are running on backup systems and prayers. I know we're tired, we're hurt, and we've lost people we loved. Her voice cracked slightly, and Kelrith realized she was grieving even as she fought. But we're human. And humans don't quit when it gets hard. We quit when we're dead, and sometimes not even then. Who's with me? The response was immediate. Every surviving human vessel, 23 ships out of the 50 that had begun the battle, turned toward the mothership. They were damaged, depleted, running on fumes and determination. They should have retreated, should have preserved what remained of their forces. Instead, they accelerated into the teeth of the enemy's most powerful defenses, weapons blazing, singing their battle songs even as their ships were torn apart around them. Kelrith could not look away. The humans fought like beings possessed, like every shot fired and every maneuver executed was a personal declaration that darkness would not win today. The indomitable Chen's flagship had lost half its hull but continued forward, ramming through Reaper defenders like a battering ram made of pure willpower. The final sacrifice. Chief's vessel, a heavily modified assault ship called Old Reliable, made it furthest. The grizzled human had somehow kept his ancient ship functioning through damage that should have reduced it to scrap. He flew alone into the mothership's primary weapon port, the one place where its armor was thinnest, and Kelrith heard his final transmission. My grandfather was right. Fear is contagious, but so is courage. And courage is stronger. Always was, always will be. There was a pause, and then Chief laughed, actually laughed as he dove into the heart of the enemy. For humanity. For the future. For everyone who thinks they're too small to matter. The explosion was catastrophic. Chief had overloaded his ship's reactor core, turning Old Reliable into a bomb that detonated inside the mothership's central structure. The massive Reaper vessel shuddered, dark energy bleeding from wounds across its hull. Its coordinating signals to the fleet became erratic, then ceased entirely. Without their guiding intelligence, the Reaper forces lost cohesion instantly. Individual vessels continued fighting, but without strategy or coordination. They became targets instead of predators, and the Alliance fleet, inspired by human sacrifice, tore them apart with righteous fury. The aftermath. When the battle ended 3 hours later, the Void Reapers had been destroyed or driven off. The Alliance had won, but the cost was staggering. 41 human vessels had entered the battle. 7 survived, all heavily damaged. Of the 12,000 humans who had crewed those ships, fewer than 3,000 remained alive. Commander Sarah Chen sat in what remained of the Indomitable's bridge, her uniform torn and blood-stained. When Kelrith's shuttle docked with the crippled flagship to deliver medical supplies, they found her staring at a holographic display showing casualty reports. Tears streamed down her face, but her expression was not one of despair. It was grief mixed with pride. They didn't die, Chen said when Kelrith approached. They gave their lives. There's a difference. Every single person on every ship knew what we were doing, knew the odds, and chose to be here anyway. Because that's what humans do. We stand up. We fight back. We protect those who can't protect themselves. Kelrith's form shifted through colors they had never experienced before. Deep respect, profound sorrow, and something close to awe. Your species is terrifying, they said honestly. You faced certain death and charged toward it singing. You sacrificed thousands to save millions. You changed warfare itself in a single battle. Chen looked up at the Syntherian ambassador, and despite her tears, she smiled. We're not terrifying because we're not afraid to die, Ambassador. We're terrifying because we're willing to die for something bigger than ourselves. Every human who fell today died knowing they were buying time for others to live. And we'd do it again every time without hesitation. Why the stars tremble. In the days following the battle, Kelrith compiled a report for the Galactic Council. It would become one of the most important documents in diplomatic history, studied by every species seeking to understand humanity's place in the galaxy. The report's conclusion read, humanity does not possess superior technology. Their ships are often inferior to ours. They do not have greater numbers. Their entire species could fit in a single sector of most galactic empires. They do not have longer lifespans or superior physical abilities. What they have is something far more dangerous and far more valuable. They have decided that some things are worth dying for, and they charge toward those things with absolute conviction. The Void Reapers were an enemy that fed on fear, that won through psychological dominance before the first shot was fired. They had never encountered a species that transformed fear into fuel, that used terror as motivation rather than paralysis. When humans charged into battle, they brought something the Reapers could not comprehend: the willingness to sacrifice everything for others, the courage to face darkness without flinching, and the unshakable belief that what they fought for mattered more than their own survival. This is why the stars tremble when humanity goes to war. Not because they bring superior weapons, but because they bring something no enemy can defeat with force alone. They bring hope wrapped in determination, courage forged in sacrifice, and the absolute refusal to let darkness win without a fight. We learned something important in this battle. We learned that survival is not the highest good. Sometimes, living for something is more important than simply living. The humans knew this truth instinctively, written into their very nature by a homeworld that tried to kill them for millions of years. They did not just survive Earth, they conquered it, made it their own, and carried its lessons into the stars. The galaxy is safer because humans exist. But the galaxy should also remember to be respectful, even fearful, of beings who charge into certain death while singing songs of defiance. Because that kind of courage, that kind of determination, cannot be reasoned with, cannot be intimidated, and cannot be stopped by anything except complete annihilation. And if you try to completely annihilate humanity, you had better succeed on the first attempt. Because if even one human survives, they will remember what you did, they will gather their strength, and they will come for you with all the fury of a species that learned to thrive on a death world, that forged themselves in constant struggle, and that refuses to accept that any fight is truly unwinnable. When humanity charged into battle today, I finally understood why the universe trembles. It's not fear of what humans are, it's recognition of what humans represent. They represent the terrifying possibility that courage can overcome calculation, that sacrifice can defeat superior force, and that sometimes the smallest, weakest, most fragile beings in the galaxy can stand up to the darkness and win. Not because they're strong but because they refuse to be weak. Not because they can't feel fear but because they face it anyway. Not because they want to die but because they've decided that how you live, and what you're willing to die for, matters more than how long you survive. This is the human truth. This is why the stars tremble. And this is why, despite everything, I am grateful they are on our side. Calrith submitted the report and returned to the observation deck of the Eternal Vigil. Below, human repair crews were already working on their damaged vessels, already preparing for whatever came next, already singing those strange, defiant songs. And Calrith understood, finally and completely, that the galaxy had changed forever the moment humans decided to charge into the dark. Because darkness, no matter how powerful, could not stand against beings who carried their own light within them, and who were willing to become flames that burned themselves out if it meant lighting the way for others. The battle was over. Humanity had won. And the universe would never forget.